The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
Roman Anthony's extension shows that the Boston Red Sox are not acting like a small market team.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast.
The biggest topic of conversation for today is Roman Anthony has been extended by the Boston Red Sox. How exciting is that? Former number 1 overall prospect in baseball, now the star rookie outfielder, made his money. Talk about a big payday for a 21-year-old kid. He signed an 8-year, $130 million contract extension to stick with the Red Sox. It happened yesterday afternoon. So heading to the game, big news for him and big news for the Red Sox. They were riding a 7-game win streak, so vibes were already really high. And then that just added even more to the vibe. And an hour and a half before first pitch, he actually walked around Fenway Park in a blue checkered suit rather than his normal batting practice attire because, you know, this is a special occasion, so it calls for something fancier. So the way that this extension is structured for him is it begins with the 2026 season and includes escalators that could bring the overall value up to $230 million. The deal also includes a 2034 club option for $30 million because technically the 8 years would go past 2033. And then it also includes escalators for either a first or second place rookie of the year finish if he finishes 1st through 10th in MVP voting, and all-star selections are a part of that too. So the escalators includes the elevation of money and him being able to make more, but also he would become a free agent 1 year earlier if he meets some of those qualifications. So that's having to do with his performance, but the Red Sox have him locked up for the foreseeable future, which is very exciting. He said, I couldn't think of a better city to play in for the next 8 to 9 years of my life. And I'm super excited. I want to thank all the fans who show up every day and continue to support us regardless of the outcome. It's really just a special place to play and a special place to show up every single day. I couldn't be more excited for this and couldn't be more thankful for everyone in this room and everyone who's helped me get here today. That was what he had said during his press conference when they announced the extension, and he's super excited about it. One thing to know about Roman Anthony is that he is super quiet but super humble. Like, because I've worked closely with a lot of the players in Worcester this year, I've gotten to know Roman pretty well, and he's not the most vocal kid, kind of on the shyer side, but he's just incredibly humble and just is there to put 100% effort in every single day, and you would never know based on the way that he acts that he was a former number 1 overall prospect in the sport, and that attitude is going to get him places. It's just been such a whirlwind year for him because he was called up to the majors just under 2 months ago after a really fast ascent through the minors. And entering last night's game, he had slashed a 283 batting average, 400 on base percentage, and 428 slugging with an 828 OPS and 19 RBIs in 46 games since he debuted on June 9th. So all of those numbers were what earned him that extension. He's played a big part in the Red Sox recent success too, as he notched his first career walk-off on Friday night to set the tone for what ended up being a 3-game sweep of the Houston Astros. So the way that he's been contributing to this Red Sox team has truly just been remarkable to see. And for him, he just portrays so much plate discipline for somebody his age and just so much maturity, the way that he carries himself both on and off the field, but his swing decisions go far beyond what somebody his age typically would be doing. We saw Cedar Rafaela struggle a lot with swing decisions in his rookie season, kind of chasing a lot of pitches outside the zone. You really don't see that a lot from Roman. He takes his walks, he doesn't strike out at a high rate, and he's able to make really good contact. Now, he still needs to unlock his power a little bit. That's definitely something that I'd like to see a little bit more of from him, is really hone in on that power that he definitely has in him to be able to just smash balls out of Fenway. Once he starts doing that, then you really will see the full package of what Roman Anthony is. And on top of all of this, what's crazy is that he's still just 21 years old. Trevor Story actually spoke on it and said it's hard to believe, man, just given his stature, the way he carries himself, his maturity level, and all that follows him onto the field too. Just a special person, a special player, obviously someone who's going to be around for a long time, and pumped that he's on our squad. Roman Anthony's extension is the latest in a line of early extensions issued by Craig Breslow in his tenure. He signed Christian Campbell to an 8-year, $60 million contract in April with just 6 days of service time. And a year earlier, he gave the same treatment to Shedeur Sanders, who signed for 8 years, $50 million. The Red Sox and Anthony had previously engaged in extension talks during spring training before he had a feel for playing in the majors or living in Boston. And now, just 159 at-bats into his big league career, the outfielder was sold on the experience. And as for the Red Sox front office, they knew really early on that Roman was a player that they wanted to invest him. Breslow said, I don't think we view him all that differently in terms of recognizing that this was an incredibly mature 20-year-old at the time, 21-year-old now, but someone that we felt like was going to successfully transition to the big leagues. Someone that we believed could be a cornerstone player for us. The path to regular playing time wasn't super clear, but this was always someone for whom we had really, really high expectations. So there's no doubt in the Red Sox front office's mind that this was a deal they were planning to get done for a while. He was a player that they had identified as special for so long, and they were excited for his call up. But quite frankly, it had less to do with just the immediate impact that he made on the major league team, which of course is really special, but the overall package of what he offers and even what he was doing in the minors showed the Red Sox, hey, this is a special kid. This is somebody who we want to lock up long term. And in a testament to their support of Roman, a number of players were in attendance for Wednesday's press conference. Fellow rookie Marcelo Meyer and then Romy Gonzalez and Jarren Duran were the first in the room, with a dozen or so other teammates fleshing out the back two rows and creating a standing room only section. So he had a bunch of support from his team. Meyer said, super happy. Roman's a brother to me. I've played with him for a couple of years now. Just to see his dreams come true in that aspect makes me super happy for him and his family. So the Red Sox have a lot to be happy about as of late. They entered Wednesday having won 14 of their last 15 games at Fenway. So now it would be 15 of 16 after they lost last night. And their 39-22 home record is second behind Toronto for best in the American League. And they are absolutely rolling. And now they've locked in yet another young star for the foreseeable future. Roman said it's super exciting when you talk about how young we are and the mix that we have of the great veteran guys that we have. So there's a lot to be excited about. And knowing that in this process was a big reason as to why I wanted to stay here and be with those guys and grow with those guys. So he's really excited about the future that the Red Sox have, and he loves playing in Boston, and that's a reason why he knew he wanted to stay. And this contract is a really team-friendly deal because they are the ones that can choose to exercise the option for 2034 if they want. They are the ones paying him a really reasonable amount of money. And what does this show about the Red Sox front office? That they are no longer going to listen to conversation that they are cheap and that they don't want to pay anybody. Yes, they paid Rafael Devers, and yes, they traded him a couple of years into that deal. But what this shows is that the Red Sox are no longer being cheap. They are extending the players that they feel are worth extending, that they see as cornerstone pieces for their future. Basically pulling a Houston Astros from a while back before the Astros were really relevant and going to the World Series, what felt like super consistently, when they just had a bunch of young players and they were trying to figure out who was going to be a key piece to that future. They wanted to retain a lot of guys who they felt like could lead them a path to success. So Roman Anthony's for sure one of those players. They've extended Garrett Crochet. They've extended Brian Bayo. They've extended Christian Campbell and Shedeur Sanders. So this is the Red Sox setting a tone of just because we traded Rafael Devers doesn't mean we're cheap. It means we just didn't feel like he was part of the future for what we're trying to accomplish here. And with where the Red Sox are at now, they know that Roman Anthony is a part of that future. So this is a big statement by the Red Sox front office that shows we are not being cheap. And it really could help turn the feelings of some of the fans more towards what the Red Sox are trying to do now and moving forward.
We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. With Gametime, the price you see is the price you pay. No hidden fees. Take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
Nobody can benefit more from Friday's preseason game than Shedeur Sanders.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast.
We now know for a fact that Shedeur Sanders will be starting on Friday for the Cleveland Browns in Carolina. Kevin Stefanski confirming those reports on Tuesday that he would be the starting quarterback on Friday against the Panthers in their first preseason game. There were some more comments from Kevin Stefanski just in regards to his plans moving forward. Basically made it clear that it'll only be Shedeur Sanders and Tyler Huntley who even get a chance to play on Friday. They're putting Joe Flacco in bubble wrap, probably because they have two other quarterbacks who are hurt, and so they're trying to protect him. And then also, we know because those two quarterbacks are hurt, and Kenny Pickett and Dylan Gabriel, they won't be playing. Kevin Stefanski also made it clear that he will not play most of the starters on Friday, and so that's notable as well. We'll get into some more of those things here coming up later in the show. But the first thing I wanted to hit on was just the fact that with knowing Shedeur Sanders is starting on Friday, first of all, this game could end up being the most watched preseason game of all time, at least the most watched Browns preseason game of all time. Because listen, Shedeur Sanders is without question a star across the NFL and somebody who people are following this Browns team right now. I see it on the network as well, simply because Shedeur is on this team. And so there are going to be a lot of people tuned in and glued to their TVs to see Shedeur Sanders make this start in the first preseason game. And what's going to be interesting is because, as I found out from Julian Council yesterday, who hosts Locked On Panthers here at the network, he told me flat out that that Canales, their head coach, has made it clear that they want to start these starters for, I think he actually clarified today it was going to be about 12 snaps, 12 plays. And so it will be Shedeur Sanders against the Panthers' first-team defense. It will be the Panthers' first-team offense against the Browns' mixed and matched first-team/second-team defense. So we'll see what all that kind of looks like. But Shedeur Sanders is going to get a real opportunity here to go up against an NFL caliber, an NFL starting defense on Friday when this game opens up. And so, listen, I don't know if there's anybody, and I understand this team has a lot of rookies on it. This team certainly has guys who are vying for roster spots, and that's what the preseason ultimately is about, right? Is the guys on the back end of the roster trying to prove on tape and put in a game setting that they deserve a spot on this roster, and sort of those guys in the bubble get a chance to, maybe find a place or find a home if they earn that spot. So I'm not saying those guys don't have something to earn, or that there aren't other players with something at stake here in the grand scheme of things as they try to, make an NFL roster. But when it comes to this Browns team, there isn't a player on the roster with more to gain from Friday's game than Shedeur Sanders. I mean, we've seen it. We've seen the stuff at practice. We've seen the rep distribution. We know he hasn't taken reps with the ones to this point. But him getting a chance to go out there in a live setting and go up against the first-team defense of another team is going to be the best chance he gets to prove, hey, time to give me more reps, time to let me run with the ones, time to really show you what I can do. And if he does it, the outside part of it, the outside noise is going to be louder than ever for Shedeur Sanders to see more time and take more reps. But I think internally they're going to have to start to sort of pivot their thought process if he really looks great against especially that first defense for the Panthers, and he's out there just balling. And there's another thing too, like there's one thing that I don't know a lot of people have accounted for. I know the diehard Shedeur fans who are mostly here because of Shedeur Sanders or following this team because of Shedeur Sanders. Like, I know you guys know this already. I certainly know this from watching his tape a lot and watching a lot of those Colorado games last year. Shedeur has that gamer persona in him where basically what I'm getting at is like when the lights turn on, when the lights are their brightest, when you're out there on the field and you're expected to go make plays, he performs. He puts on a show. And he kind of alluded to that actually on Monday before practice when he met with the media, because he said, like, somebody asked him, like, what are you expecting from the preseason game? It was a question along those lines. And he basically said, like, I mean, you know, you saw me in college, you know what I can do. It's going to look like that. And that's the thing that I think should have everybody excited, because they're all like, I understand, you know, the practice reps, they show you something. It's a piece of the puzzle. It's a piece of the puzzle. In the meeting room, film study stuff and you know, learning the playbook, that stuff absolutely matters as well. It's part of the puzzle. But there's always one thing, and this isn't just Shedeur, but like across the league, there's always one thing that you sometimes can't account for with a player. And that's their ability to, when the lights are on, when they're out there on the field, when they're playing in a game setting, what do? And some guys can just rise to this different occasion, even if the practice tape or the practice hasn't, the practice reps haven't been great. And I'm not saying, by the way, that they've been bad for Shedeur. I'm just saying, like, in other instances, sometimes there's guys who, like, practice isn't the setting for them, but when they're out there on the field, they just turn it up a notch, and there's just something about it, and they relish that feeling. And that's what Shedeur has. He is a gamer. He's a guy that when the lights are the brightest, when he's out on that, the field is his stage. And it's the stage for all these players. But for Shedeur, like, there's something about that environment of just being on the field that brings out the best in him. And I think we saw that certainly in college. I think some of that probably comes from his dad, right? Like, growing up as the son of Deion Sanders, Deion was like that. Deion was a show within the show that is football. And I think he thrives in that environment the same way that his dad did. And so you can't account for that in practice. You can't account for that in just like watching, you know, tape in the film room and all that. It just kind of has to happen naturally, organically, when you put them out in those situations on the field. And so I'm excited to see that element of Shedeur's game come out of him, hopefully on Friday, and allow him to have success that I'm anticipating he's going to have. And if he does that, if he balls out, I mean, it's going to be louder than ever for Shedeur to see even more reps and get even more of a fair shake in this competition. And I do think the Browns still want to be patient with him. They don't want to put him out there too soon. And I think I think to a degree, I think that's okay, because this organization has messed up a lot of quarterbacks by putting them out there too soon. But Shedeur can really force the issue if he goes out and balls on Friday, especially against the Panthers' first team defense for what Dave Canales is saying is going to be like 12 reps or so, or 12 snaps or so. That's going to be a key thing here. And I don't know that enough people have accounted for the fact that Shedeur has that gamer mentality about him. And that could just mean that, like, on those stages, he's going to be better than even what he's looked like in practice. And that's going to make it undeniable. That stuff, like the preseason tape stuff, is going to, it's another piece of the puzzle. And sometimes guys just thrive in those environments. I think Shedeur fits that billing. And I think we'll see that from him on Friday. So, as I said, I don't know if there's a single player that has more to gain from playing in Friday's preseason game and making a name for themselves and showing what they can do than Shedeur Sanders himself.
You are Locked On Patriots, your daily New England Patriots podcast.
Josh McDaniels and Drake May cooked against Washington in the first joint practice of 2025. We've talked about this joint practice since we got the camp schedule. This was one of those dates that you circle on the calendar saying it's a pretty big day. It is truly the first big test for this football team. And the offense, they passed that test. Greg Bedard writing on the offense. Offense looked very sharp especially in the red zone, which should be music to everybody's ears, given some of the struggles from May in the offense in the low red zone area. Red zone today, mostly really, really good. And as we go through what the offense did today, I want to make sure that everybody understands that this is a joint practice. This is not a Super Bowl. We're not anointing the Patriots champions of any kind, but you do have to walk away feeling optimistic with the trajectory, especially for this offense. Let's start with May. He was good to very good during this practice against the Commanders. Mark Daniels of Mass Live posts, May starts practice going 10 of 12 against Washington starters. You have Evan Lazar posting, May was feeling it, looking off coverage, off platform throws, etc. Back to Bedard. Outside of the interception, which happened late in practice, we'll get to that, he was very sharp. Speaking of May, finding open receivers all over the field for team periods. I want you to absorb this. For team periods, May was 14 of 20, but that included drops from Travion Henderson, and Pop Douglas. So he should have really been 16 of 20 in team periods. Drake May had not one, not two, but three passing touchdowns. He had a scrambling touchdown. He did take one sack and again had that interception on his final drive. But what we are seeing from May on the balance of this camp is a comfortable Drake May, is a confident Drake May, is a May that has chemistry with his wide receivers and a quarterback that looks decisive. Now, as far as that late interception in practice, he had Pop Douglas wide open, tried to get it to Pop. Bobby Wagner got his hand on it at the second level, tipped it up, and it was picked. Similar to what happened in the scrimmage with May. So I know Bedard kind of threw out the idea of May changing his arm angle on those kinds of passes, but it was a tip pass by Bobby Wagner, and then that led to the interception. But overall, don't get it twisted. Drake May was good to very good in this joint practice. He wasn't the only one. The wide receivers showed up. Yeah, I didn't make a mistake when I just said that. I know it's hard to believe being a Patriots fan and watching that position for the past couple of years, but the wide receivers during this joint practice, they showed up, they made plays. And I would point out as well, Stephon Diggs was late to this practice, not sure why, but he was late to the practice. He did participate in 7-on-7s. We'll see if he's out there on Friday night in the preseason game. But a lot of the damage, pretty much all of the damage, was done by receivers not with the last name Diggs, which to me is a great note. It's pivotal that you're getting production in this kind of situation when Diggs is not out there consistently for this joint practice. And what we saw from the receivers today, according to all reports, was promise. Pop Douglas continues to be a stud. I know I said a moment ago that he dropped the pass, but really, I mean, he has been outstanding. He's been outstanding. It continued during this joint practice. Taylor Kyles of CLNS, he called Pop Douglas today unguardable. And you could say that about Pop throughout most of this camp. 7-on-7s, 11-on-11s, scrimmages, 1-on-1s, doesn't matter. Pop Douglas keeps getting open over and over and over again. And how about Kayshon Boutte? Kayshon Boutte has shown the consistency that we were all hoping that he would somehow find. He has shown that throughout this camp so far. I think that outside of Mac Hollins being the veteran and signing in the offseason and the history between Hollins and McDaniels, if you're just looking at this, receiver versus receiver, Kayshon Boutte right now is the third receiver on this team. Diggs, Douglas, then Boutte. That's how it would be if all things were equal. And he might be the third receiver on this team when all is said and done, when we are ready for week 1 against the Raiders. But Kayshon Boutte continues to show up, continues to make plays at practice in a variety of ways. Evan Lazar, May to Boutte on a back shoulder fade from the high red zone for 6. So a touchdown catch. by Booty. Another one, back shoulder. What's that tell you? Chemistry. Even more important about Booty, here's what Drake May said post-practice. This was transcribed by Los Talk Pats on Twitter. Quote, "Coach keeps saying you do the right thing and you keep doing it over and over. I can trust you. It's comforting knowing that Booty's going to be in the right spot and it's my job to give him a chance," unquote. Booty is showing that consistency. He is showing some maturity for sure. And he has earned the trust of Drake May. Continues to have a good camp, but it didn't stop there. Javon Baker, who really has been defined by his inconsistencies. We've discussed that. Well, over the past week or so, he is showing that consistency. You can pretty much count on Baker to make at least one, if not multiple, good plays in a practice. And he showed up at the joint practice, caught a goal line slant, according to Evan Lazar, for a touchdown from Joshua Dobbs. And as Lazar put it, Baker's roster push continues, and it does. Right now, Javon Baker is your sixth receiver, I would say. If you are bringing six out of camp, Baker is the sixth guy. And then you had Mac Hollins, and he had an impact. Bedard wrote about Hollins, showed why the Patriots signed him as a big red zone target. He caught 4 of 5 passes from May and a touchdown. Mark Daniels wrote that Hollins just hauled in a really nice 25-yard touchdown from Dobbs. And beyond those guys, Efton Chisholm had 4 or 5 catches in this practice. Really the only receiver that you'd be looking for that didn't do much, according to what I read and heard, was Jalen Polk. Not much written about him, and he might be losing ground. He's definitely lost ground to Baker, and he might have lost ground during this joint practice to Efton Chisholm. How about the offensive line? Good news. Will Campbell, the trends continue, and the trend has been good in team, good with run blocking, some wins and losses with the one-on-ones. And that's what we saw during the joint practice. Chris Mason from Mass Live. Campbell held up well in pass pro during the first 11-on-11 period. Looked just fine. Bedard on Campbell. Campbell mostly held his own. Played very well in the 11-on-11s, including a big block on Dietrich Wise to spring a big Travion Henderson run. He didn't give up a pressure in team periods that I could see. Not one pressure. One-on-ones were a mixed bag in 3 reps against Wise. So mostly what Campbell's done throughout this camp. He has looked good when it comes to 11-on-11s, those team drills. He's doing well. One-on-ones, he loses here and there. Run blocking, doing a good job. Nothing alarming so far. No matter what anybody's saying out there, don't listen to the noise. There's been nothing alarming about Will Campbell and his camp to this point. Wise was asked about Campbell, again, transcribed by Los Pats Talk. Quote, "He's really good at using his hands, very strong guy, has a very high ceiling. I faced tackles who have short arms before. It's all about the heart." And if you're wondering about Jared Wilson, he also had a good day. Bedard wrote, "Wilson looked really good against a good Commanders defensive tackle group in one-on-ones. Wilson beat Dorrance Armstrong and Cleveland Farrell. He had a draw against Deron Payne." So if you're looking at that young left side of the offensive line, Campbell solid, Wilson maybe even more than solid. And it just didn't stop there, because the rest of the offensive line, breaking news, was not a dumpster fire. Nothing crazy happened. Morgan Moses, by the way, was out. Vrabel said he's dealing with something. But the offensive line, if you were wondering, they held it together during their first big test at this joint practice, much like the wide receivers and Drake May. They passed. They passed that test.
Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first order. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first order.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast.
The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have signed quarterback Teddy Bridgewater to a 1-year deal. Now, Baker Mayfield returned to practice on Tuesday, but before that, the Bucs only had about half of their quarterbacks available over the last couple of practices because of injury. Now, they add a seasoned veteran with a ton of experience into the room to help back up Baker Mayfield. Todd Bowles was asked about the signing and said, quote, "He brings us a wealth of experience at that spot. Obviously, we don't have it. Kyle has been here a few years, but he hasn't really played. Obviously, we have the new guy just coming in." He's referring to Connor Bazelak, the undrafted rookie. But so we need the extra arm. We think we need some experience in that room. The more experience, the better. I believe he can help if he's here. He's definitely a guy that can do that. He's been in some of the same systems as Baker has been in. He has a wealth of knowledge from a coaching standpoint as well as a playing standpoint. He can't do anything but help, end quote. Jason Light was also asked about it, saying, quote, "We've talked about this actually over a couple of weeks, maybe even over the summer. We had some discussions about it, that it would be a nice addition for the room, good for Baker. He's an experienced guy, obviously very smart, hell of a high school coach, hell of a coach in general, but just a good addition to have that wealth of experience there. We still have preseason games to play and all that, but right now Kyle is our backup. That's the intention, and that's what we're hoping for. But yeah, everybody's competing," end quote. All right, here's where I think it gets interesting, because at this stage, I don't care who they say the backup is. I think they don't make this signing unless they feel they need to upgrade the backup quarterback. That's no disrespect to Trask, but I've said it for a few years that I didn't think he was going to be anything more than a career backup anyway, after I had more than a couple of opportunities to watch him up close. And I think Baker missing some practices and Trask being on, a 1-year deal basically made him vulnerable when they watched him out there with the first team offense. I think that's kind of what sped this along a little bit. Yeah, you can have discussions about all kinds of guys. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. But they made this move, and they made it for a reason. Here's the way I look at it. God forbid Baker goes down and misses a game or two. Let's say he gets banged up. It's his ankle or his shoulder or something. Nothing serious, but it's bad enough that he's going to miss 2 games. And let's put a little bit more on the line. Let's say it's 2 games in late November, early December. Crunch time, where every game can mean the difference between making or missing the playoffs. Which quarterback are you going to trust to go out there and get a couple of wins against teams like the Cardinals and Saints? Kyle Trask, who's entering his 5th season and has thrown 11 career passes? Or Teddy Bridgewater, who was in Miami with Grizzard, has started over 60 games as well as a playoff game, has completed over 66% of his career passes, has 75 career touchdowns and only 47 career interceptions. He's been a starter. He's backed up Breeze. He's backed up Goff. That's not a guy that's going to take a backseat to Kyle Trask. I'm sorry, but he's not. They don't sign this level of player just because they needed an extra arm at camp. I think ultimately the coaches and Jason Light didn't like what they saw over the last couple of days with Trask at the helm, and they thought, you know what, we have a real shot at winning it all. And if Baker goes down for any length of time, our season goes with him. So they looked to upgrade. They revisited those conversations that they had, and they said, we need to pull the trigger on this. Now, if Baker goes down for extended time, and I'm talking a major injury that takes him out for half of the year or more, then the Bucs are cooked anyway. But let's not forget that, this was a situation that Bridgewater was in back in 2019. He had to step in for Drew Brees, and he went 5-0 with 9 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. He completed almost 70% of his passes on his way to being one of the top finalists for the comeback player of the year. If you just wanted an extra arm or someone to get through, the next couple of weeks while these guys deal with injuries, you go get Jeff Driscoll or Jake Fromm or CJ Beathard or you get an undrafted free agent. You don't pluck a guy away from being a head football coach at a high school that was just in the league last year with the Lions as their number 2. You don't bring that guy in who played for your offensive coordinator a few years ago, who played for your defensive line coach when he was the head coach at Louisville. This was a signing that was made because Teddy is a player, I think, that this coaching staff feels that if they need someone to go out at the quarterback position and win 1 or 2 games this season, they have more faith in him to do it than they do Kyle Trask. And I hate to pile on and try to make it seem like I don't like Trask. I do. He's a great dude. But I have very little confidence that he can step into a regular season game and steal a win with his experience. There is nothing that Teddy B hasn't seen or hasn't been through in this league. There's nothing that's going to surprise him at this stage of his career. He can go on the road against the Rams and steal you that game. Is anyone going to have that kind of faith in Kyle Trask? No. And it's not his fault that he doesn't have experience. He backed up Tom Brady and then he backed up Baker Mayfield. He was never going to win that competition a few years ago. And we all made fun of the idea that it was a competition, when they announced it, because it wasn't. We knew from day one Baker Mayfield was going to be the starting quarterback. There wasn't really a market for Trask in free agency. The Bucs wanted him back because of his familiarity, so they agreed to a 1-year deal. But it's 1 year with $1.3 million guaranteed and a max value of $2.7 million. That doesn't exactly scream untouchable. Now, there's no word as of yet what Bridgewater's deal is outside of just 1 year, but I think that's also going to be really telling. If he's getting more guaranteed money than Trask, then you know who the number 2 quarterback on this roster is going to be come week 1. It'll all work itself out throughout the rest of camp and in the preseason. I don't think we're going to see Teddy this weekend against the Titans, but we might, depending on how quickly he takes to the offense. But this was done in order to have a better, more experienced backup for Baker, someone that has proven that they can win games in this league. This was a move, like Jason said, that they've talked about for weeks. That's long before these injuries happened. That's long before they actually needed another arm. This was them preparing themselves to bring in a player that's going to help the team as a whole. It's a move that's going to help Baker Mayfield in that quarterback room, in those film studies, on that sideline. And he's going to be able to step up if called upon.
We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. With Gametime, the price you see is the price you pay. No hidden fees. Take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
The NBA offseason is winding down and Cam Thomas remains without a contract.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast.
A lot of uncertainty surrounding Cam Thomas's contract, but it's safe to assume that that is the role he wants. Starting guard, probably paying him somewhere in that range. It doesn't look like he's going to get it, but ultimately long-term, if that's where he wants to be, how do you feel about him being in that position for a team that is trying to make a deep playoff run?
Well, it's interesting because you look around and he will look at Jalen Green making $35 million a year, Emmanuel Quickly in the same ballpark. These kind of guys that you can make an argument that Cam Thomas is just a better player than. And yet, there seem to me to be a lot of valid reasons that maybe he is not that caliber of player, of, piece to a really good playoff team. So I think that the market is maybe correcting at the worst possible time for him. And he might be getting screwed right now, but I don't think that it is unjustified, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And I think this is poor timing for Cam Thomas. And I would understand the comparisons that he's had. Like I've reported that his camp went into negotiations with some comparisons to guys like Jalen Green, Emmanuel Quickly, Jordan Poole, whoever you want to say in those contracts. And with no teams having cap space and also this being a new CBA, it just doesn't seem like he's going to get that. But in another world, there's a scenario where Cam Thomas gets paid on his rookie deal, like a Jalen Green or like those players that he's in a similar tier to, and it just hasn't worked out that way for him. And in his case, that could be, hundreds of millions of dollars that he lost out on. So I understand the frustration, but yeah, I mean, how do you feel about, because I think when you're talking about whether Cam Thomas is going to be a long-term starter in the NBA and with the Nets, it's interesting to see this offseason, the trend of NBA teams kind of going away from the off-ball scorers who are really like shot-first guys. Like that archetype seems like it's being valued less than ever before, whether you talk about, guys like Norman Powell or Colin Sexton or Malik Monk, who's supposedly been on the trade block and really hasn't garnered much interest. Just all those different guys don't seem to be valued by NBA teams. So is that surprising to you? And do you agree with kind of that player archetype, how front offices are approaching with what their market value is supposed to be?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. And I generally do. Like the bar to be the guy or one of the top two guys on a good NBA offense, 25, 30% usage is just so high. I mean, if you're not the A-plus passer playmaker, then you need to be scoring like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who I think we can agree is, maybe a tier 2, tier 3 kind of passer and floor reader, but can't say enough about his scoring. Maybe Jalen Brunson falls in the same bucket. And then on the other hand, you have all around playmakers that can do everything. Like you think about Jokic and Embiid when he's healthy and, who's become a great passer and guys like that. So the bar is just so high to have the ball in your hands all the time for a really good NBA team. And the thing with Cam Thomas, and he's gotten better at pretty much everything you could have asked of him. Like he's, if not great, shown improvements in all these areas. And yet, is he good enough to have the ball in his hands all the time? Probably not. And if not, is he providing enough value everywhere else to command the $25-30 million a year on a really good team? Like, I think he's gotten better on defense and maybe better as an off-ball offensive player and, cutter and passer. But the answer, unfortunately, is no, probably.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily disagree with you. And I've spoken about this at length because I've done so much coverage of CT and the contract situation. And it really is just that. There's so few guys that can be on the ball. And if Cam isn't on the ball, where is he providing value to warrant the $30+ million that he wants in free agency? Those flashes in those other areas of his game just haven't been there up to this point. And we'll get into, each side of the ball. Let's start on offense, though. And let's just start with his scoring ability, because obviously that's the main calling card. And if you are going to be that, as you said, that, lead guy who has the ball in your hands, your scoring ability has to be just astronomical. And Cam has flashed elite scoring ability. There were questions about his efficiency that, went up to, I think, a little slightly above league average last season in the games that he did play in. But when you look at what he's done, how he's changed throughout his career, how do you feel about his scoring ability, the efficiency, and the process? Is it something where you think what he does in that area really warrants him having the ball as much as he's going to want to?
Yeah, I mean, last year he was well over a 30% usage, and I don't think that's a winning formula for 99.5% of guys in the league. And I'm not even saying that as a slight to Thomas. And, I don't even think if you asked him, do you want the ball that much? I don't think he would maybe be as excited about it as you might think. Maybe if he's on a more talented offensive roster, his usage goes down. And I think, for whatever you want to say about Cam Thomas, I think he would understand that. And if he's playing with Kyrie, he would defer some shots. KD, James Harden, these guys that he entered the league with. His offensive co-star, if he had one last year, was Cam Johnson, Dennis Schroeder, and then the off-ball guys like Keon, Tyrese Martin. Like, these guys aren't creating shots. So I don't think his massive usage rate is totally a product of him being like, give me the ball, I want the ball. That being said, I think he's gotten to the point, I think he's a positive offensive player. Like, there is enough catch and shooting. He's a really good, just catch and shoot guy from three, and that will always provide value. His last 2 games he played before his final hamstring strain were some of the best kind of floor reading, playmaking games of his life. 10 assists, I believe, against Chicago. And
in the last game of the season,
Yeah.
it had to be like, for the CT
Of course.
discourse, it had to be the last game of the season just to leave us with that note of like the last thing we see, like, oh, Cam Thomas is scaling up the passing, and then he goes after the season. But
of course, but it's so fitting for his career and Nets tenure. It's like, this could have been all year. But it matches everything. Like the assist to turnover, all that stuff, all the ancillary stuff has gone up. And, he's creeping right up towards, league average true shooting, if you want to use that as a very basic barometer for how efficient he is. So this is a guy that I think is a positive offensive player. And that is not quite enough, by itself. But I'd be very happy with the strides he made, just on offense over the course of his rookie contract, especially, I don't want to get too far off on a tangent, drafted 27th or whatever he was. He's outperformed that. Jalen Green's underperformed number 3 draft pick, but because of, where they were drafted, that's why the contracts have gone these different ways. But that's where I'm at on Cam Thomas offensively. Generally, he can help a good offense. It's just how much.
And you said that, he's a positive player offensively at this point, but that's not enough. And I think the reason that that's not enough in his player archetype is because of what you're giving up on the other end of the floor. And we'll get to that. But I do want to talk about the playmaking quickly, because we talked about the scoring. Obviously, that's been his calling card. But people have said, offensively, he's going to have to be more of a playmaker to warrant having the ball in his hands that much. I think we've definitely seen improvement and growth from him as a playmaker. And, I don't know if that's saying all that much, because he really couldn't go any further in the other direction. Like, you can only go up from where he started out. So, I don't want to diminish what he did, but I think we still do. If you just look at the numbers, there's a lot of advanced numbers on it. He passes the ball and generates potential assists less compared to how much he has it relative to a lot of his other guard counterparts. And I do think even in that stretch at the end of the season where he was passing more and he had a lot more like 6-7 assist games, there were a couple of really big moments down the stretch of games that were close where he was missing wide open passes. And it seemed like it was just going up no matter what. So how do you feel about his playmaking growth overall?
You look at the numbers and you look at some of the film, and granted, a lot of the playmaking is like, basic kind of pick and roll read. Not basic, but you're hitting the roller. And then if this guy comes over, you're hitting the corner. And those are good and valuable passes, but it's regimented offense. When you watch these games, it's like, it's what you just said. It's like, if it gets close, if we're in clutch time, if it's like a dynamic situation, if he, catches it on the wing and it's kind of a scrambled play, you probably don't trust him to like read the floor. And there are these modes where it's just like, okay, this shot's going up. Like, he's not going to pass until it is the last option. And when you are probably project to be at the highest level, a little bit more of an off-ball scoring guard, catch and shoot threes, some side pick and rolls, stuff like that, it's just easy to game plan against.
Mm-hmm.
And that is really why the offense will leave you wanting, even though we see the lobs and the dump offs to Nick Claxton. Like, that is great, but it just doesn't feel like, and I don't want to say ever because he's 23, whatever. He's only played 4 years, but it really, gun to my head, it doesn't feel like the offense is going to reach a point where he's tough to game plan against in that sense.
And I understand that. And I think, for me, from the passing perspective, I think it's always been a willingness. And I think like he shows it in flashes, and he might do it just enough for people to say like, look, he had this many assists in this game and it's improving. But I do think that it is what you said. Like a lot of the pick and roll stuff we see, he's operating in the pick and roll, he's snaking, he's getting to his spots with the intention completely of shooting. Like he is not looking usually to get rid of the ball. And that's not always a bad thing. Like I love players who have that kind of confidence, but I do think there's a lack of willingness. And I think that that will lend itself to some issues when you're trying to be an offensive engine and have the ball as much as he's going to.
Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first order. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first order.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Texas currently has the 6th highest ranked recruiting class in America for 2026. That's pretty good, right? Most teams would be thrilled to have the number 6 class in any cycle, but things are a little bit different around here. And y'all know that Texas has had 4 straight top 5 classes. And more importantly, they've had 1 straight top 1 class. And once you know that you can reach number 1, well, you want to keep getting there, right? Like last recruiting cycle was really fun. This year has been kind of fun, especially over the last couple of weeks since what went down at SEC Media Days in Atlanta. But we're not just looking for kind of fun. We're looking for really fun. Nobody wants to be number 1 at something just one time. Once you get there, you want to keep doing it time after time after time. So what does Texas have to do to once again land the top ranked class, this time for the 26th cycle? It's not a pipe dream. There is a path for this to actually happen. And the path starts with Texas landing 4-star defensive lineman Jake Krell, the edge rusher from IMG Academy in Florida. He's set to announce his commitment next Tuesday on August 12th. Texas, Oklahoma, and Ole Miss, his 3 finalists in that battle. Texas was playing catch up for a big part of this recruitment, but it sounds like 6 days out, the Longhorns are in the lead. And most Texas insiders feel pretty good about Texas ultimately winning this battle. For a while, it felt like OU was the team to beat. Right now, it feels like Texas is that team. And look, anytime you get a 4-star, you'll take it. Anytime you can get one that was considering your biggest rival, yeah, you'll take that even more. Jake Krell is a top 10 edge rusher in this class, the 63rd ranked player overall. So if the Longhorns land him, they'll likely go from class number 5 or 6, depending on which site you look at. And the composite rankings have Texas at number 6, which is why I used that number earlier. You go from 5 or 6 to 3 or 4 if you pick up the commitment of Jake Krell. That's how good he is. And that's kind of where the Longhorns class stacks up with some of the teams that are ranked just ahead of them right now. So 3 or 4 is better than 5 or 6, but it isn't number 1. And that's what we're going for here. So for Texas to climb up to that number 1 spots, they're going to need a little bit more, and they're going to need some flips. So who are some of the top flip candidates that Texas could realistically get before National Signing Day on December 3rd? We'll start with an offensive tackle. We've been talking about that position a lot this week since the Andre Kojo injury story dropped on Monday. Obviously, a flip isn't going to be able to help this season, but a flip would help for the future and hopefully ensure that Texas isn't in this kind of spot down the line. You got to keep bringing in a number of offensive linemen in every single class. Texas has a few of them and a few really good ones committed already, but landing 4-star tackle Malachi Lee from Honolulu. Yes, that Honolulu. I don't really know if there's another Honolulu. I don't know why I said that. He's currently committed to Michigan. Texas was one of the finalists when he announced his commitment last month. And since Lee picked Michigan, Texas hasn't stopped recruiting him. I mean, the staff has been in constant communication. And more importantly, Malachi Lee has been responding to Texas's calls and texts. So, Lloyd, I'm telling you, there's a chance. And I'd say a pretty good one. I feel good about Texas getting the flip. I think tackle might be the top need for Texas in this cycle. Obviously, the Felix Ojo situation didn't help. The Longhorns felt like for a majority of that recruitment, they were in the driver's seat for Felix Ojo. Tech comes in with that last-minute huge offer. He ends up committing there instead. So, again, Texas has a few talented guys committed right now, but they are still looking for more. And I think the Horns would and probably should be going all in on another blue-chip offensive tackle in this class. So, Malachi Lee, we've talked about him a couple of times. Again, Texas has remained in constant communication with him even after his commitment. Michigan's got money. They got resources too. So if this turns into an NIL battle, Texas might have to pay a pretty penny to get this one done. But again, I feel like the Horns know that they need another tackle, and Malachi Lee is one of the top guys that they could realistically get to flip. Easy for me to say right now. So Krell and Lee would be great, but those two together still probably don't get you to number one. So who else is out there? Well, there are a couple of Oregon commits who had Texas as a finalist before choosing the Ducks. And I'm usually a bit weary about having success flipping anyone away from Oregon with all the Phil Knight Nike money that they've got up there. They bring in top class after top class after top class. They've got money. They've got resources. They've got a lot of things that have helped them be competitive in this era of college football. But Texas has had success in flipping Oregon commits in the last two cycles. Last year, it was Josiah Sharma on the defensive line, one-time Oregon commit, now with Texas. And in this cycle, it was edge rusher Richard Wesley, who once did a flip into a pool with Oregon coach Dan Lanning when he announced his commitment to Oregon early in the spring. Someone jumps into a pool like that, kind of assume they're pretty serious about their commitment. Well, Texas was able to get a flip a few months later from Richard Wesley. So that's twice in the last two cycles. Could it happen again for the Longhorns? A couple of names worth paying attention to. Jalen Lott, a Texas legacy who is from the state of Texas. Both of his parents went to UT. He's a wide receiver / athlete, just kind of a do-it-all, jack-of-all-trades player that Texas really wanted. Oregon got his commitment last month. Could he be a guy that potentially changes his mind? And then defensive back Devon Benjamin, who committed to the Ducks last week. That's another one. He's from California, doesn't have the Texas ties, but the Longhorns were a finalist in Benjamin's recruitment. Neither of those guys are going to be easy, but again, Texas was a finalist. I think they finished runner-up for both of those players. Could they make it happen again, stealing another player from the Ducks? I wouldn't hate it, and that would definitely help. Both of those guys are top 100 players in the cycle, and either one of them would give the Horns a big boost in their overall class rating. Another big fish that's out there. This one feels maybe the least likely of the names that we've touched on so far, but I'll bring them up anyways. 5-star edge rusher Trenton Henderson out of the state of Florida. It's another name we're talking about. Texas made a very late push in this one. They became one of Henderson's finalists after getting a late visit over the summer. He's currently committed to LSU. Maybe Texas can get a flip here. That might depend on LSU having a bad year and or their defense looking like Swiss cheese again. LSU fans are starting to get a little impatient with Brian Kelly. I don't know if he's on a hot seat just yet, but the seat's starting to warm up a little bit. The last three LSU coaches all won national championships. Brian Kelly keeps losing season opening games and keeps missing the playoff. At some point, he's going to have to get over that hump. And if LSU has a down year, well, that could help Trenton Henderson change his mind. And obviously on the other side, you need Texas to have a good year for him to pick the Longhorns. So that's another name worth talking about. And then last but not least, you look at the linebacker position. I think maybe not the level of tackle, but I do feel like that is still a position of need in this 26 cycle, even after the addition of Tyler Atkinson, the 5-star a couple of weeks ago. Texas freshman linebacker Jonathan Cunningham, he's actually been getting reps at nickel during fall camp. So if he stays there, that means there's only one linebacker that Texas signed this year. That's Bo Barnes. They also only signed one last year with Anthony Smith. That's not enough. 2 in 2 years, just from a body standpoint, isn't going to get it done. I think both of those guys are going to be great players at Texas. But again, that's just not enough numbers to have in your linebacker room. So you've got a couple committed right now, but remember the name Brandon Rouse? It was a UT battle a few weeks ago. We picked the fake UT over the real one a couple of weeks back. Could he still be an option for the Horns? And then another linebacker, 4-star Isaiah Williams from Florida, another out-of-stater. He's currently committed to Ole Miss. He could be an option too. The Horns are going to continue trying for both of them. So long story short, Texas doesn't need all of those recruits to flip to end up with the number one class. Now, I won't complain if they get all of those guys, but they do need a couple of changes of heart to once again claim the top class in the sport. And if you do that in back-to-back years, recruiting success doesn't guarantee you national championships, but it sure as heck doesn't hurt your chances. And I will say that not recruiting well guarantees that you're not going to recruit national championships. So stars matter and class rankings matter. I know there are plenty of stories of 2 or 3 stars who turn into great players. Love those stories. Those guys are important too. But stacking elite classes in a row, that guarantees yourself a chance to make some things happen. That's been a big part of why Texas has made it to the CFP in consecutive seasons. They keep recruiting like this, that streak is going to continue for a long while. And I think that's what all of us are looking for, right? So there you go. There is a realistic path. Again, you need a lot of things to break your way, but there is a legitimate possibility that the Horns go back-to-back like Jordan 96-97 with the top-ranked class in the sport.